The following episode of Crusade for Myth Drannor is adapted from Call of the Elvenflow by Ian Hawthorne. Fresh off of a spider-slaying adventure and eager to relax a little at the suggestion of the Dryad Kaltensendra, Jynx, Massul, Rilyanasse, and Túrendil make their way to visit the town of Buttergroves. The pleasantly uneventful trip to Buttergroves leaves them beyond the woods to the estuary of the Duathampir River, an ancient landmark said to be the last barrier between the old elven kingdoms of Cormanthor and the wider Moon Sea. The river is often fast-flowing in the main part, but recent droughts have left the flows shallow and sluggish. Wide mudflats, sandbanks, and waterflow channels are scattered across the mouth of the river. The track-rutted trail winds down to Mother's Crossing, a collection of huts with rough-hewn keel boats beached nearby. A sign above the door of the largest reads, "Barrel's Boats, Crossings by Arrangement." "This place looks great," Jynx remarks, drawing attention to themselves as the halfling and the rest of the party approach. The proprietor, a thick-set, burly human with a growth of stubble and sharp eyes, greets the party in a gruff but jovial manner as they approach. His oarsmen, loitering nearby, rise to dust themselves off. Introducing himself as Vance Stonegaze, he responds to each of the party in kind as they greet him and inquire as to his health. "Doing well, you come to the right place for a crossing." Pleasantries out of the way, Vance steers the conversation toward the business of crossing. Asking after his price, Stonegaze offers to ferry the lot of them across at a price of 8 silver pieces. Jynx makes a counteroffer of 4, eager to haggle. The boathouse owner offers to knock the cost down to 5 silver and include a return trip. Satisfied they've secured a good deal, the 4 of them begin making preparations to cross, though Vance warns it will need to be 2 trips to avoid overloading the boats in the low water. Túrendil questions the necessity of such caution. Massul shifts his pack. Jynx tries their best to make friends with the dog sitting near the oarsman, and ever-perceptive Rilyanasse catches that a few things are amiss at the huts along the idyllic riverside.
"I feel our friend is generous with borrowed feathers,"
she chimes in Elven. Massul and Túrendil's attention gain the 2 paws. Vance and the oarsmen, oblivious to the conversation, continue preparing the boat for crossing.
"That is to say,"
the ranger continues,
"perhaps better not to travel with barnyard fowl borrowing duck feathers, no?"
Túrendil, catching the thrust of her protests, asks to confirm. "You mean these are not the ferrymen?" The discussion continues for a moment more, with Rill drawing to their attention the locked and shuttered business, and the suspiciously blank notice board before drawing these oddities to the attention of the ferryman.
"Have I caught you at a bad time, good sir?"
Vance replies in the negative, but is further pressed by Túrendil. He makes an aside in a foreign tongue to his employees. Further suspicions aroused, the party asks a battery of questions, all answered or deflected by the oarsmen and Vance. Unsatisfied with the reasoning of the ferry folk for splitting the trip across, the 4 decide to part ways with the boatmen. Not wanting to pick a fight without more information, the party excuses themselves from Mother's Crossing and seeks alternate arrangements to traverse the estuary. Concerned that imposters may have done something terrible to the workers at the crossing, the 4 devise a plan to distract the guard dog while Jynx infiltrates the boathouse. The halfling sneaks in through a side window unseen and begins searching for clues, prisoners, or bodies. While the interior of the hut is mostly mundane, there are a few things of note inside. The cash box appears to be empty, with the lock broken. There is a hot pot of fish soup simmering on a wood-fed stove, but little else of interest. The party waits until the next day before deciding to risk further confrontation, arriving in the company of a family making the trip to Mother's Crossing. The 4, ahead of the townsfolk, pay another visit to the crossing to ply Vance and his workers with further questions. Who owns the business here? Who is Barrel of Barrel's Boats? Why are you afraid of overloading such large boats? Each query is answered in turn, though perhaps not to the satisfaction of those present. Exasperated, the ferryman eventually agrees to haul the lot of them across the estuary, still insisting on taking only 2 at a time. Túrendil and Rilyanasse go first. In the middle of the flow, the truth of the matter becomes clear, as the oarsmen halt and draw blades, with Stonegazer demanding gold in exchange for not dropping you off halfway, observing Rill's limp and suggesting she couldn't swim well if they didn't part with their gold. Like all of his kind, though, he proved a coward, knuckling under to Rill's threats of the wrath of the Tel Kasir, backed by Túrendil's hand on the hilt of Nephilium.
You think it wise to play that game with 2 elves and a very large owl.
Once on the other side, a few threatening words and brandishing of blades to get to the truth of the matter get little more from Stonegazer besides the safe passage of the rest of the travelers, even about the whereabouts of Barrel of the Boathouse. Massul makes it clear that if he sees these charlatans trying to pull anything again, they'll be food for the fish, as the dwarf unceremoniously shoves the boat back into the water, Vance and his oarsmen still on it. They gladly part ways with the armed and confrontational adventurers. Buttergroves is a short walk along a rutted cart track away from the crossing into the forest. The trees part, revealing a well-tended swatch of meadow with a single gnarled oak at its center. Wooden huts form a circle around the center of the idyllic town, adorned with climbing roses, window boxes, and wooden tubs planted with colorful flowers. The town is bustling with activity as men and women are busily shelling nuts, churning butter, and cutting and drying herbs. Livestock wander the town and adjacent land leisurely. A square-faced middle-aged man approaches to meet the four on the path into town, wiping his hands on his leather apron and extending it in greeting. "Hello, travelers," he says. "Stow your weapons, you won't be needing them here. We've nothing worth stealing unless it's a barrel of stout that takes your fancy. I'm Kenrick, and this is Buttergroves. What brings you to our humble home?"
"I be here to try some of your famous butternuts."
Massul chimes in, earning a pat on the back from Kenrick, and offers for the four of them to try his homemade cider. Jynx enthusiastically shakes Kenrick's hand, Túrendil offers a blessing from the Seldarine upon his house, and Rill gives her thanks for his hospitality. The conversation turns from thanks for the cider to the goings-on about the village. The butternut harvest is in, and the tune of work songs carries through the air mixed with the bustle of the day's work and the ambiance of goats and chickens wandering the town. An elderly woman, a half-elf with white hair back in a loose braid, sings under a nearby tree of impressive size. She wears flowing green robes and is adorned with bead necklaces and bangles bearing mysterious elven symbols. Canaries flutter around her and the branches of the tree.
"They seem pleased to see you, as are we. I told you there was nothing to worry about, Kenrick. The Hexad would never let us down."
She addresses the friendly man who had greeted the travelers as they came into town. She introduces herself as Mother Strala. Túrendil and Rilyanasse recognize the mention of the Hexad, an ancient alliance of 6 goodly deities, all whose domains encompass the forests and the wilds. Strala leads the group to shelter in the shade from the midday heat, while she and others among the villagers converse with the party. They offer the history of the village, its founding, and the significance of the Hexad to those living there, especially the ancient half-elf. Eventually, the problems of the village of Buttergroves come to light in the conversations, but are easily condensed to a few specific points. Normally, the village is supplied with a wealth of fish while the river shrinks from the drier season, being able to pluck their dinners from the water with but a net. The fish supply is all but dried up, coinciding with a plaintive howling coming from way up the river, a haunting sound carried on the wind from the south in the stillest of nights. Allegedly, the howling is enough to make the blood run cold or break the heart of the listener. Mother Strala had placed her faith in the Hexad and offered prayers, but 2 impatient boys, Dickon and Kester, took it upon themselves to investigate, leaving 2 nights ago and not having been heard from since. Their parents, Mildred and Ned, further described the boys as being 14 and 17 summers respectively. Mildred is concerned they only left with their walking sticks, knives, and enough food for a day or two, while Ned is more optimistic that the 2 know the woods well. Both are worried by this point and ask the party if they would look for the boys, though the village isn't rich by any means. Kenrick warns that the woods south of Buttergroves are ancient, and strange things stir there that are best left alone. He advises following the deer trails through the forest to travel upriver. The folk of the town offer other tidbits of advice, insisting before going into the woods that the party turn their coats inside out, carry a pisky pole, and avoid any bargains with the little people of the wood at all costs. The grandfather of the boys asks them to visit him before they set out, as he may have supplies helpful in searching for his grandsons. But the conversations have meandered and the hour grows late. The people of Buttergroves offer to put the travelers up in the shelter of their homes for the night. The quiet calm of the forest in the spring drifts through the open windows, and the night is filled with the voice of Mother Strala reciting an old bedtime story to drowsing children.
Long ago, when the world was younger even than you, and the sky still hadn't decided what color it wanted to be, the gods saw trouble brewing between human and beast. "We must protect the animals from men," said Sylvanus of the woods. "We must protect the men from your animals," said Shanti of the fields. "We must protect them both from each other," said the old elven god Rilifé Rathiel. And so the gods put their heads together and thought until an idea came to them, and together they began to weave powerful magics. "I will hide the beast," said Sylvanus, and the woodland trails became confusing to humans who from that day forward could easily become lost. "And I shall protect my fields," said Shanti, and the flowing rivers rose up, cutting off the old woods. The waters became talismans against woodland folk, as iron nails are to witches. No fairy folk can cross running water. And so, it's said to this day, that a man can find his way in a wood as easily as beast can cross a river. Over time, human and beast learn to respect each other's ways and help each other where they can. So if you're ever lost in a wood, look for a deer trail and follow it toward the sun. And if you ever see a creature in need, think favorably towards it, for it may even be the deer that will lead you out of the woods.
The rooster's crow rouses the first of the folk of the village, and a light breakfast later the four decide to set out. Leofric, Kester, and Dickon's grandfather gift the travelers a healer's kit and a bag of magical butternut husks, capable of drying out even a small pond in the blink of an eye. The others gift what they can, a bit of food, a healing potion, and with that the morning sees them off into the woods. It's not long before the rimwood at Buttergroves turns to taller pines, and those in turn give way to old oak, ash, beech, and shadowtops. Deer trails crisscross each other, forming a maze in the foliage, while the branches overhead dim the light of day to near darkness. The crunch of leaf litter underfoot tells of the recent dry spell as much as the folks' trouble with the low river. Insects flit by, and motes of dust dance in occasional shafts of light that pierce the canopy. Animals can be heard beyond the edge of sight, the rustle of brush and the flap of wings as creatures flee the approaching adventurers. The pervasive feeling of being watched hangs over the expedition, though pausing to find any observers reveals naught. A few hours plodding in what they're certain is the correct direction rewards the party with a clue. Propped up against a tree ahead is a single walking stick with a blue and green knapsack tied to the end. One of the boys. Massul rushes up to examine the find, but is caught unawares by a covered pit, a yelp of surprise and frustration escaping his lips before he lands in the hole with a thud. A short fey with a wicked-looking scythe and a blood-stained cap jumps from behind the tree the stick had been propped against, and from behind him jumps a needleblight in an aggressive stance. He shouts something in Sylvan, which the ranger understands as cruel, taunting rhymes. "Down on your luck and down and out! The heavy boots will sort you out!" While the needleblight clicks menacingly. The Fey, Grizzlenick, is recognized as a Redcap, a dangerous evil Fey of the forest with a penchant for cruelty and violence. He is bent and crooked with the weight of years, with deep lines in his face and calloused hands holding his wicked weapon. Túrendil and Jynx rush forward to back up their dwarven ally as he attempts to scrabble out of the hole, while Grill rains arrows on their enemies and sends Elvenflow in soon after to join the fray. The Needleblight is the first to fall, and what follows that is a drawn-out melee of near misses and desperate fighting, as the four of them try to overcome the Redcap's natural resistance to their weapons and incredible ability to naturally heal, all while praying his scythe does not find purchase on their necks. Grizzlenick weathers blows from the melee combatants and trades bard verses in an impromptu sylvan flighting with Rilyanasse. After nearly a dozen rounds of combat, the Redcap sees that he's in a losing position and cuts his losses. Giving one final kick at the interlopers in his forest, he flees into the underbrush. Not wanting to tangle with the wicked little man again, the four hurry along the trail, hoping to find some clue as to whether the boys escaped the Redcap. It is not long before the trail leads them to an idyllic grove of silver birches. Sunlight filters through the canopy to paint the ground, the aroma of honeysuckle carries on the breeze, birdsong fills the air, and rabbits hop lazily about the grove. Before more steps can be taken, the face of a pretty woman peeks out from behind one of the trees. Her skin is a dark brown, her hair a tangled mess of leaves, her eyes a striking green, all framed in the features of a fey. A dryad, to be sure. Rill introduces herself, as well as the rest of her companions, assuring the Maiden of the Oak that her sister of the wood Kaltensendra had sent them. The conversation does not have long to take many turns before a young man with tousled dark hair and a shirt unbuttoned to the waist steps bravely from behind the same tree, reproaching the travelers in a firm voice with fire in his eyes that none shall bring harm to his love Betrayal. The reality of what they'd stumbled upon in the woods dawns on a few of the four and earns more than one sensible chuckle. Rill confirms that this is indeed Kester, and a moment of conversation with the boy reassured the suspicions of the heroes that he might be under some kind of enchantment. Satisfied that the only thing compelling the lad here might be the Dryad's company, Túrendil asks after Kester, explaining the danger the wood poses with the redcap stalking the unwary beneath the canopy. Betrayal assures her visitors that she had driven old Grizzleneck away from the boys, and that they had been enjoying her protection until the bellowing of a trapped beast drew the boys' attention further downriver. A light scolding from Rill to Kester about the concerns of his mother and the whereabouts of his brother turns the conversation toward the latter. Betrayal posits that the bellowing may be that of a trapped gorgon of which herds had wandered the northern reaches of the forest since Cormanthor's inception. The waters of the Elvenflow were blessed by one of the Hexad, that any gorgon crossing it would be afflicted with the same curse their breath wrought, turning them to stone. The recent drought must have caused the river to fall low enough to free it. Massul goes a little pale at the mention of petrification. Jynx slips him a handful of granola in an attempt to ease his nerves. Little debate is needed to usher the four of them south toward the plaintive cries of the trapped beast, Kester staying behind in the safekeeping of the Dryad. It is not long before their suspicions are confirmed. A young gorgon is trapped in the mud of the low Elvenflow, struggling uselessly in the muck. The other missing lad is visible as well, having gathered logs and debris to construct the beginnings of a pathway through the mud toward the trapped monster. Dickon answers questions about his lack of concern for his personal safety around the beast simply with the teachings of the Hexad, citing that beasts must be protected. The monster interrupts a short debate with another sad, loud bellow echoing through the forest and met in the distance in kind. Understanding that their gorgon problem was threatening to multiply, the four set about determining whether the beast could be pulled free with a rope from a safe distance, or if adding to Dickon's walkway was truly necessary. Cautious of its petrifying breath, Rilyanasse offers her silken rope, and a lasso is fashioned to be tossed about the beast's neck. With the whole group pulling to aid the efforts of the struggling beast, it's barely a minute of work before the young monster drags itself out of the mud, leaving behind dozens of petrified fish in the riverbed where it had once been. It starts to gallop away, but slows at the edge of the wood, turning to regard its saviors. With a regal bearing, it bends a knee and bows, and then disappears into the forest, the sound of iron hooves growing fainter and fainter. A cheerfully colored canary flutters past, perhaps a timely sign of the Hexad's blessing. Despite a firm suggestion from Rilyanasse that he ought respect his mother's wishes and return to Buttergroves with the rest of them, Kester chooses to remain with Betrayal for now, with her assurance that he would be kept safe from marauding fae. The return to the town is a peaceful trek through the woods. The people of Buttergroves, and particularly the missing boy's parents, are overjoyed to hear the news that the missing boys have been found. The strange bellowing haunting their nights has been quelled, and that the fish they depend on should be far more numerous, now that they no longer have to contend with a monster's petrifying breath. Though it is meager by many standards, the town feasts with the four of them, each celebrated as the hero they are. This concludes Call of the Elvenflow, but our crusade for Myth Drannor is far from over. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you for the rest of the adventure.